In this, the 76th anniversary year of the Pearl Harbor attack, there is nothing to fear except what the First Lady of American journalism, Dorothy Thompson, feared. Her dictum: there is nothing to fear except the persistent refusal to find out the truth and the persistent refusal to analyze the causes of happenings. So who in the Pearl Harbor story is guilty of that? Let's analyze it. I'll start with an analysis of the meaning of responsibility. Mindful that the Navy Department's last refuge for denying Admiral Kimmel advancement is to persistently refuse to find out the truth by applying an abstract concept of command responsibility to avoid any further analysis. This abstraction, in fact, conceals faults and destroys responsibility. Accordingly, I have found this exercise to be useful. Consider, if you would, Tom Schwartz is clearly responsible for having me here today, in the same sense that Admiral Kimmel and General Short were responsible in Hawaii, in the sense that Tom Schwartz, like Admiral Kimmel and General Short, had to properly respond to information he had in getting me here today. Clearly, Tom Schwartz is also accountable for having me here today. Again, in the same sense as Admiral Kimmel and General Short. I had to properly account for everything he did and did not do in getting me here today. So what have we learned so far? I submit, not much. What we really want to know, is Tom Schwartz blamable for having me here today? And for you, ladies and gentlemen, to decide when you see him again, should he be punished for having me here today? That's the key question. Okay. And speaking of responsibility, blame, and punishment, let's recall what Alexander Hamilton had to say about it centuries ago. The executive tends to conceal faults and destroy responsibility. It often becomes impossible amidst mutual accusations to determine on whom the blame or the punishment ought really to fall. Who is there that will either take the trouble or incur the odium of a strict scrutiny into the secret springs of the transaction? If there happened to be collusion between the parties concerned, how easy it is to cloak the circumstances with so much ambiguity as to render it uncertain what was the precise conduct of any of those parties. Ladies and gentlemen, no one on the Kimmel side denies that the commander is fully responsible. But the truth is that the advancement issue has nothing to do with assigning responsibility and everything to do with bureaucratic malice and abuse of authority. Consider this question. Why is Admiral Kimmel the only qualified flag officer not advanced under the Personnel Act of 1947? Anybody want to try and answer that one?
Roosevelt.
What's that?
Roosevelt.
Maybe I better continue. Here's the answer. This is very important. In 1948, the Navy Department merely omitted the name of Admiral Kimmel from the list of flag officers whose promotion was authorized. That would be everyone else, without any reference to his or anyone's performance, constituting a belated special disciplinary action of a punitive kind taken without notice to the officer specifically singled out by such omission, Admiral Kimmel. This is so important to my presentation, I want to try and drive the point home. Let me try a hypothetical. A hypothetical. You may want to think of Pete Peterson in this as well. My hypothetical, here we go. The Congress passes a law allowing special good guy awards, I'll call them SGGAs, to all United States Naval Academy Alumni Association members. The Navy Department, however, merely omits the name of Tom Schwartz from the list of United States Naval Academy Alumni Association members whose SGGA award is authorized. That would be everyone else, including several members that are well known as bad guys, or at best not good guys, without any reference to his or anyone's performance, constituting a belated special disciplinary action of a punitive kind taken without notice to the officer specifically singled out by such omission. Colonel Tom Schwartz, United States Air Force, do I have that right? Or Pete Peterson, Captain U.S. Navy retired. If we can't get Pete Peterson or Tom Schwartz by hook, then we'll get them by crook. Please note that in neither the Kimmel case nor the hypothetical Schwartz-Peterson case is there anything said about performance, let alone command responsibility. I should mention that the Army treated General Short in the same underhanded way. Consider this. Of course, General Short is the only general officer not advanced to his highest World War II rank under the Officer Personnel Act of 1947. Consider Major General Henry Miller. 7 weeks before D-Day, General Miller, a member of General Spatz's Army Air Corps staff, got drunk at a nightclub in London, Claridge's, and proceeded to take bets that the D-Day invasion would occur before June 15, 1944. When General Spatz found out about it, he went ballistic and placed General Miller under house arrest. Eisenhower also went high orbit, demoted General Miller to colonel, and returned him to the United States. Other examples were clearly made without consideration of performance include Major General John Lucas at Anzio and Major General Lloyd Friedenhall at Kasserine Pass. All were advanced under the Officer Personnel Act of 1947 to their highest held temporary rank in the war, except for General Short and, in the Navy's case, Admiral Kimmel. Okay, here's the real story within the Pearl Harbor story. 9 days after the Pearl Harbor attack, the President of the United States selected a sitting Supreme Court Associate Justice, Owen Roberts, to investigate the Army and the Navy only, and then only in Hawaii. 10 days after the Pearl Harbor attack, Admiral Kimmel and General Short were fired and replaced. 11 days after the Pearl Harbor attack, Supreme Court Justice Owen Roberts began his deliberations. They investigated for a grand total of 36 days. 47 days after the Pearl Harbor attack, the Roberts Commission submitted its report to President Roosevelt, declaring Admiral Kimmel and General Short solely blamable for the success of the Japanese attack and derelict in their duty. President Roosevelt immediately signed the report, unredacted, and gave the entire thing to the press. 47 days after the Pearl Harbor attack. End of the story. Soup to nuts. And that would have been the end of the story, but for this man, Captain Lawrence Safford, the head of Op 20G, the head of Naval Communications Intelligence, indeed the revered father of naval communications intelligence. Captain Safford, at great personal risk to himself, years after the Roberts Commission, went to visit my grandfather living in disgrace in Bronxville, New York, a despondent, beaten man. Captain Safford, unannounced, walked into Admiral Kimmel's office and said, "Admiral, did you have available to you, sir, in Hawaii, the same information we had available to us in the Office of Naval Intelligence from the secret decoding of Japanese diplomatic and spy communications in a program that we codenamed Magic, that gave us, Admiral, prior to the Pearl Harbor attack, indications of the time, place, reason, and deceit plan to cover the attack? Did you have that information available to you in Hawaii?" Admiral Kimmel looked at Captain Safford and said, "Captain, what in the world are you talking about? What is Magic?" Safford explained. That very day, February 21st, 1944, Admiral Kimmel went from a beaten, despondent man, he turned into a fighting tiger. He got himself legal representation out of Boston. The junior attorney in that legal team, Ed Hannafy, took Safford's information and actually wrote the enabling legislation, which he took to the Naval Affairs Committee. The Naval Affairs Committee was so impressed with what they read, they went to the full Congress, and the full Congress passed a law ordering the Army and the Navy to conduct further investigations, or there would have been no further investigation of Pearl Harbor 47 days after the attack. This is the real story within the Pearl Harbor story. One man, my grandfather's determination to get the facts of the Pearl Harbor story before the American public. All of these investigations, save that one, were caused to occur directly as a result of the efforts of Admiral Kimmel, or this last one here, by the efforts of Admiral Kimmel's two surviving sons, my dad and my uncle. Okay, this chronology you see before you, indeed just the first listed investigation in the chronology, is really all you need to know. Consider this. Secretary of the Navy Frank Knox, 3 days after the Pearl Harbor attack, went out and investigated. A week later, he secretly reported back to President Roosevelt that Kimmel and Short were not alerted, and that the fighter planes they needed had been sent to the British, the Dutch, the Chinese, and the Russians. The next day, however, Secretary Knox was told to tell the press merely that Hawaii was not alert. Not that they were not alerted, that they were not alert. The press was then free to take it up a notch to report that Hawaii was asleep. So in the blink of an eye, Hawaii went from not alert to asleep. Amazing what a little collusion can do. Knox's Deep Sixth report was known to the Roberts Commission, but was not revealed to Kimmel and Short. Investigation number 2, the Roberts Commission. Here's the dark heart of the Roberts matter. The Washington High Command falsely testified to the Roberts Commission that Kimmel and Short had the same magic information in Hawaii as they had in Washington, D.C. This false information was calculated to do and did Kimmel and Short irreparable prejudice. The Washington High Command had an obligation as officers and decent human beings to rectify the prejudice to Kimmel and Short from such deplorable misinformation. They did not do so. Investigation number 3, Captain Safford revealed magic to the Hart investigation. Investigation number 4, Admiral Kimmel revealed magic to the Army Pearl Harbor Board after General Marshall, the head of the Army, had committed perjury and ordered his subordinates to do the same, which they did. General Marshall was severely criticized by the Army Pearl Harbor Board. Of all the Pearl Harbor investigations, how many of them accorded Admiral Kimmel the opportunity to defend himself? And by defend himself, I mean the opportunity to call and to cross-examine witnesses. Anybody? How many?
0.
Very good. 1, the Naval Court of Inquiry. The Naval Court of Inquiry was the only Pearl Harbor Tribunal that accorded Admiral Kimmel the opportunity to defend himself. The Naval Court of Inquiry virtually exonerated Admiral Kimmel and criticized his only uniformed boss in the Navy, the Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Stark. The Naval Court of Inquiry found that there was not a scintilla of evidence to support a charge of dereliction of duty against Admiral Kimmel. They found that Admiral Kimmel had committed no errors of judgment on the basis of information that he was given. They approved of all of Admiral Kimmel's forced dispositions, again, on the basis of information that he was given. Their final finding was to severely criticize the Chief of Naval Operations for not keeping Admiral Kimmel appropriately and adequately informed as he had promised to do in writing on multiple occasions. The President of the Court, Admiral Murfin, opined that they, the Naval Court of Inquiry, thought that Admiral Kimmel had done everything possible under the political circumstances at that time. Investigations 6, 7, and 8, the Clark, Clausen, and Hewitt investigations, tinkered at the margins. The Joint Congressional Committee, investigation number 9, found no dereliction of duty. Investigation number 10, which is particularly interesting, the Army Board for Correction of Military Records in 1991. General Short's deceased in 1949. His son, a West Point graduate in 1999, Colonel Short, petitioned the Army Board for Correction of Military Records to find injustice or error in the Army's records. The board agreed to hear the matter, and they agreed. They found injustice in the General Short case and recommended that the relief requested, posthumous advancement to his highest held temporary rank in World War II, be granted. But that recommendation was overturned in the Army Department at higher level without an alternative finding of facts. They just did it. Investigation number 11, the Dorn Report, recognized that the responsibility for the success of the Japanese attack should be broadly shared. That was the first time the government ever made such an accommodation. 54 years after the Pearl Harbor attack, they finally said somebody else should share in the responsibility. But of course, it has not been shared. The Dorn Report merely said it should be shared, but it hasn't been shared. It is unconscionable to continue to punish Kimmel and Short once this concept has been accepted. Advancing Kimmel and Short does not diminish their command, accountability, and responsibility any more than ignoring the command, accountability, and responsibility of Kimmel and Short's superiors diminish theirs. Investigations 12, 13, and 14, suffice it to say, the matter is ongoing as we speak. Okay, let's review what the United States Naval Academy and the United States Naval Academy Alumni Association's actions in the Kimmel matter have been over the years. In 1957, the United States Naval Academy Alumni Association provided its first resolution of support for Admiral Kimmel. It's on my website. Before you, you see pages 1 and 4. Here are pages 2 and 3. In 1946, the Congress asked one paramount question. Why, with some of the finest intelligence available in our history, was it possible for a Pearl Harbor to occur? The best answer I have ever seen to that question, I saw as a first-class midshipman, as a senior at the Naval Academy, reading Nimitz and Potter's book, Sea Power. The answer to that question is from Nimitz himself. Nimitz, of course, is the man who succeeded my grandfather as Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet. Admiral Kimmel had been given no information which would justify interrupting a very urgent training program. Nimitz said that in 1960. Admiral Kimmel had 3 sons. The eldest son, Naval Academy class of 35, who was killed in the war. My dad, Naval Academy class of 36, who was almost killed in the war. And a much younger son who also fought on Navy ships in World War II, pictured here, Ned Kimmel. He fought on the Vixen and the Ranger, but he strayed badly and went to the Ivy League, graduating from Princeton and Harvard Law School. He is largely responsible for obtaining legislation in 2000, elevated to law, recommending that the President nominate Kimmel and Short posthumously to their highest held temporary ranks. That recommendation is made in perpetuity and applies to anyone who occupies the chief executive office. This, ladies and gentlemen, is perhaps my favorite photograph of all time. And the reason for it is simple, because I know how difficult it was for the Time Life photographers that took this photograph in 1991 to get both my dad and my uncle smiling at the same time like they are here. This also might be the most important slide I show you, because the modern initiative to posthumously advance Admiral Kimmel and General Short came from the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association, not the Kimmel family or the Short family, from the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association. The then head in 1984 of the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association, Alex Cobb, summoned my dad and my uncle to a restaurant in New York and requested their assistance, because the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association wanted to rehabilitate the reputation and honor of their commanders, and asked my dad and uncle for support. My dad and uncle looked at each other and said, my goodness, if the men who suffered the most from the Pearl Harbor attack want our assistance, who are we to do anything but give our all? And of course, that's why I'm here. I'm just about my dad's work. Okay, we continue on. In 1990, the United States Naval Academy provided its second resolution of support for Admiral Kimmel, this time recommending posthumous advancement on the retired list. It's on my website. In 1991, the 50th anniversary of the Pearl Harbor attack, Senator John McCain recommended advancement in writing of Rear Admiral Kimmel in a letter to President Bush 41. It's on my website. Also in 1991, 6 former Chiefs of Naval Operations, 2 former Chairmen of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and a Director of Central Intelligence, Crowell, Moore, Burke, Hayward, Holloway, Trost, Zumwalt, Turner. In addition, 26 other 4-star admirals supported this action in writing. It's on my website. Almost all of these gentlemen are United States Naval Academy graduates. In 1998, my uncle attempted to get a third United States Naval Academy Alumni Association resolution of support, but they refused. They refused to provide a third resolution in favor of Rear Admiral Kimmel. Its chairman, Admiral Snuffy Smith, explained why in a letter to my uncle. It was too difficult to do and not within the United States Naval Academy Alumni Association's purview. Admiral Smith did not explain why the Kimmel matter was not an issue appropriately within the United States Naval Academy Alumni Association's purview in 1998, but apparently was in 1957 and in 1990. The year 2000, Captain George Clow, Counsel Naval Academy Midshipman in Ethics, more specifically moral courage. Perhaps the Board of Trustees could profit from a Captain Clow lecture. That slide is offered with permission, I might add. The Board of Trustees might also profit from Nimitz's counsel. I'm told sea power is no longer used as a textbook at the Naval Academy. If true, too bad. In 2005, my United States Naval Academy class of 1966 provided a resolution of support for Rear Admiral Kimmel. It's on my website. Accordingly, I am forever thankful and respectful of my classmates Mike Kelly, pictured here, Rusty Hale, Tom Eubanks, and our #1 graduate in the class of 1966, Vice Admiral Mike Haskins. It too is on my website. Let me paraphrase Ms. Thompson's dictum for you. In this, the 76th anniversary year of the Pearl Harbor attack, there is nothing to fear except the persistent refusal of the United States Naval Institute to find out the truth and their persistent refusal to analyze the causes of Pearl Harbor happenings. Why do I say that? I say that because the self-proclaimed independent forum of the sea services, the United States Naval Institute, isn't. They persistently refuse to find out the truth, and they persistently refuse to analyze the causes of Pearl Harbor happenings. My first 4 articles listed here tell the stories of how the Navy attempted to have Admiral Kimmel fired from his civilian job after Pearl Harbor, how J. Edgar Hoover of the FBI and Congressman Clarence Cannon started the infamous lie that at the time of the Pearl Harbor attack, Kimmel and Short were not on speaking terms, how Hoover and Cannon covered up the lie when Kimmel challenged them on it, how President Truman publicly trumpeted the infamous lie charged until forced to recant, how the head of the Army counterintelligence in Washington, D.C. tried to blow the whistle as an FBI informant, and how Chairman Roberts perjured himself to the Joint Congressional Committee about the informant's information with the FBI's acquiescence. All of this material is on my website. My correspondence with Senator John McCain, numbers 5, 6, and 7 listed here, I will share with you in a moment, but first I'd like to draw your attention to item number 11, listed here. Samuel Eliot Morison wrote a famous history of Pearl Harbor in 1948. It's his volume 3. It's called The Rising Sun in the Pacific, in which he was very unsympathetic and unkind to Admiral Kimmel. Snarky even. But in 1961, he completely changed his mind and said so in a Saturday Evening Post article and in a letter to President of the United States Naval Academy Association at that time, Admiral Shafroff, where he also said he, Samuel Eliot Morison, could be counted on to sign a petition to have Admiral Kimmel's rank restored. In 2010, the United States Naval Institute republished Morison's 1948 book. That's in 2010. I asked the United States Naval Institute to include an errata sheet explaining Morison's change of attitude. The United States Naval Institute refused to do so. I've also asked the United States Naval Institute to publish my correspondence with former Secretary of Defense Hagel and former Chief of Naval Personnel Moran, without success. All of this is on my website. Recently, I asked Proceedings in Naval History of the United States Naval Institute to publish my speech on December 3rd of last year at the Henderson, Kentucky War Memorial dedication of a statue of Admiral Kimmel. I also asked that they publish my cousin Manning Kimmel and my November 15th, 2016 letter to President Obama, pictured here. I did not receive so much as a reply from either the United States Naval Institute, Proceedings, or Naval History. Of course, the United States Naval Institute is not alone in persistently refusing to find out the truth and persistently refusing to analyze the causes of Pearl Harbor happenings. Let's look at Senator John McCain and the leadership of his United States Naval Academy class of 1948, for example. Last year, I wrote to Senator McCain thanking him for his 1991 letter to President Bush recommending advancement of Rear Admiral Kimmel during the 50th anniversary of the attack. And as we are both fourth-generation Naval Academy graduates, I requested that Senator McCain please reassure me that his resolve to do the right thing endured by again recommending to the President that the President nominate Rear Admiral Kimmel for posthumous advancement during the 75th Pearl Harbor anniversary year. Senator McCain sent me back an unresponsive form letter. I wrote back to the senator and asked him why he had sent me an unresponsive form letter. I have not received a reply. So I sought the assistance of the leadership of his United States Naval Academy class of 1958. Here was their reply. We are passing on the opportunity to get involved. Ladies and gentlemen, why is all this important? Here's why. Our country must not continue to perpetuate a lie. Why is that important? Here's why. Because of its importance to the Navy as an institution. Why is that important? Because our country's honor is still at stake. And speaking of honor, one of Admiral Stark's aides was Vice Admiral William Smedberg III, Naval Academy, 1926. Superintendent of the Naval Academy, 1956 to 1958. Chief of Naval Personnel, 1960 to 1964. President of the United States Naval Academy Alumni Association, 1965 to 1967. This is from his published reminiscence in 1981. Here we go. I, Admiral Smedberg, then Commander Smedberg, kept a wax cylinder record of everything President Roosevelt said to Admiral Stark. President Roosevelt would call up and say, "Betty," a nickname for Admiral Stark, "I want this done right away." And he'd give 5 or 6 things in rapid fire order. The Admiral would say, "Yes, Mr. President, yes, Mr. President, yes, Mr. President." "Have you got that, Betty?" "Yes, Mr. President." And he'd hang up. The buzzer would ring in my office, and I'd go in to hear Admiral Stark say, "Did you get all that, Smeddy?" "Yes, sir." "Well, get going on it." I, Commander Smedberg, monitored nearly every conversation Admiral Stark had, and I made a record of almost all of them. Every now and then, when it was a personal thing, Admiral Stark would tell me to destroy the record. This information was made public for the first time in 1981. But it's only within a year since we have been able to put 2 and 2 together. And here's the other 2. The Naval Court of Inquiry questioned, interrogated Admiral Stark extensively under oath. Naval Court of Inquiry question number 388. Did you, Admiral Stark, ever keep any record, notice the language, ever keep any record of your conversations with President Roosevelt during the year 1941? Admiral Stark's answer, no, I did not. On Saturday night, December 6, 1941, the evening before the Pearl Harbor attack, after reading a secret dispatch from Japan, President Roosevelt declared, "This means war." Like the head of the Army, General Marshall, the head of the Navy, Admiral Stark, testified under oath that he could not remember where he was that Saturday night, even after his flag lieutenant, Harold Crick, refreshed his memory. This caused Congressman Gerhardt before the Joint Congressional Committee to ask Admiral Stark, "Admiral Stark, could you have been with General Marshall, since he can't remember where he was Saturday night either? All right, ladies and gentlemen, I do not want to give you the impression that I am at all exercised here. But like Vince Lombardi, I would like to know how's that, Vince? Fortunately, you can find out what's going on out here, folks, because not everyone refuses to find out the truth or refuses to analyze the causes of Pearl Harbor happenings. These Pulitzer Prize finalists tell you not only what's going on, but what went on in their book, A Matter of Honor. I asked the United States Naval Institute to publish my review of this book, A Matter of Honor. They refused to do so. This book was also the subject of a History Channel special on December 5th. It's excellent. The book, A Matter of Honor, was published on November 15th of last year, my birthday, incidentally. It is the best book ever written about Pearl Harbor and Admiral Kimmel. And I think I am uniquely qualified to make that judgment. Apparently, Vice President Biden liked it as well. He autographed the book, and here's his autograph. Keep the Faith, Joe Biden, November 1st, 2016. I made a mistake. 2016. Obviously, he got an advance copy. Vice President Biden, when he was a senator, rather famously said to my cousin Manning, while campaigning in 2007 for vice president, the Kimmel in short matter is the most tragic injustice in American military history. Here's the way it works, folks. The President nominates and the Senate Armed Services Committee consents. That's the way it works. The chief sponsor of the 2000 law recommending that the President advance Admiral Kimmel on the retired list was Vice President Biden, then a senator from Delaware. So looking at the current landscape, let me close with a moment of political whimsy. Some accuse me of being a one-issue man, but that's only because I am a one-issue man. If I had my way, Senator Lindsey Graham would be the president, as he is on the Senate Armed Services Committee and has tried to help us out. Moving on, I note that Senator Ted Cruz is also on the Senate Armed Services Committee, but I do not know his thoughts on the Kimmel matter, nor do I know President Trump's yet. Yet. But as of today, I'll say this. I'm no longer riding with Biden. If you want to hear more of this, and I'm done, this is my speaking schedule. It's on my website. The talks in blue have been recorded and they're on my website. Hopefully this talk will be recorded and will be on my website shortly. Speaking of my website, here it is. And that's my email address. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your kind attention.